Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Richard, for that moving welcome to country. These conferences wouldn't be the same without that. On behalf of my incredible team at the Perth USAsia Centre and our colleagues at the University of Western Australia, it is my honor to welcome you all to the 2018 In the Zone Conference. In a nutshell, the In the Zone recognizes that we here in Western Australia are part of a much broader region. If you look north, we're in the same time zone as Singapore, Hong Kong, Manila, and Beijing, and within a 2-hour time zone bandwidth, we've got 60% of the world's population and most of its opportunity. And the underlying theme is that the issues we wrestle with, maritime issues that we did last year, 2 years ago, looking at food security, they're all issues that defy solutions unilaterally. We can't do it alone. They require international cooperation, international coordination. We are honored today to be joined by visitors from all throughout the region, from Japan, from Vietnam, from the Philippines, from Malaysia, from India, and then of course the best and the brightest that Australia has to offer, and also the tremendous level of expertise that we have here in Western Australia. In the Zone was an initiative of the University of Western Australia. I would acknowledge my colleague, former colleague and now member for Brand, Madeline King, who was there at the inception back in 2009 for the first In the Zone conference. But I also acknowledge that this year's In the Zone is co-sponsored by Curtin University. You'll notice in the program that there's a tremendous depth of expertise on these issues at Curtin University, as well as the City of Perth, and again, our own colleagues at UWA, and then many more in the program. I'd love to go through the entire list and list all the VIPs that we've got here, but in doing so, we'd use up our time. And as you have noticed, we've got a very busy program that requires the tight timelines and focus that you would expect in the space program. So we've asked our speakers to kind of keep very closely to the schedule so that we might be able to inspire. The last note I'll make here, and again, as Ashley mentioned, we're delighted to have students here from all 5 universities in Western Australia. And we're also delighted to have students here from 12 different high schools. And so no added onus or burden upon our speakers, but in addition to sharing kind of technical knowledge with the government, private sector, academic communities here, our hope is that we'll inspire and that we'll all recognize what is possible and what is possible here. Finally, let me acknowledge, and they're both going to be speaking in just a minute, we're greatly honored for the 2nd year in a row to have the Premier welcome us and the Governor of Western Australia as well. Now, before we turn the time over to them, I'm going to turn the microphone over to John Olsen, AO, the Honorable John Olsen, who serves as the Board of Directors of the Perth USAsia Centre, and many of you may know him as the former Premier and a former Senator from South Australia. We are delighted to have John, in his position, issue some brief welcome remarks, and then in turn to introduce the Premier of Western Australia. So, John.
Thank you, Gordon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to In the Zone 2018. We thank you for your attendance and participation. At the In the Zone conference last year, several people asked me, why Perth and how was Perth USAsia Centre established? And it goes back to the AAA. Now, that's not the Automobile Association of America. It's the American Australian Association that established the United States Study Centre at Sydney University. On the success of that, we looked at putting another campus in place in Australia. Brisbane and Melbourne were serious contenders for that campus. But that we made a decision to establish the campus in Perth because of the strategic importance of the west coast of Australia, the Indo-Pacific region, its strategic importance in Australia's national interest. Now, as Gordon mentioned, as the former Premier of South Australia, I had some explaining to do as why we bypassed my home city of Adelaide and went to Perth. But it's been a decision that we have thoroughly enjoyed in the success of the Perth USAsia Centre. We struck gold when the international headhunters sought out and achieved Gordon Flake's relocation from Washington, DC, after 25 years leading a think tank there to Perth in Australia. He's like that ever-ready bunny. He never, ever stops. His energy has no bounds. His contacts are enormous. The Korean Peninsula, for example, has been much in the headlines of the last year. DFAT sources Gordon Flake, and he's been up there each year with the embassy in Korea, assisting with the debate, the dialogue in relation to the Korean Peninsula. Such is the respect and standing of Gordon Flake. And Perth, you are very lucky to have a man of his calibre leading the Perth USAsia Centre. We've just secured the next tranche of funding from the federal government. And Premier, we look forward to having discussions with you in the near future so that we may, as is the unanimous support of the board, to continue this centre's location in Perth. Our association with the University of Western Australia is outstanding. The cooperation and the collaboration has been exceptional. And the success of this centre is underpinned by the fact that we've partnered with 65 different groups around the world. We've held over 400 events in something like 16 cities in 8 countries around the world. We've enabled some 200 students from Western Australia, Perth, to participate in UCLA summer schools in the United States, where they get credits towards their degrees here in Western Australia. The centre operating out of Perth, I suggest, puts a reset balance in Australia from the East Coast to the West Coast. And that is really important given Perth's strategic location in the Indo-Pacific region. Events of this calibre can only be achieved with support of government and the private sector. And the American-Australian Association is proud of its role in establishing and getting funds from the private sector, both in the United States and Australia, to underpin the activities of a centre such as this. Premier, we are delighted to have you as our special guest again today. You were prepared as Leader of the Opposition to join us when we announced this event at Winthrop Hall at UWA. You were prepared to join us last year, shortly after your election as Premier of Western Australia. So we thank you sincerely for your involvement, your participation and your support of the Perth USAsia Centre. Mark McGowan is the 30th Premier of Western Australia, who presided over the most comprehensive victory, securing the largest majority of a government in Western Australia's history. That's not a bad start and a bad foundation for a government. Premier, we welcome and thank you for your continued participation at events such as this. Would you please welcome the Premier of Western Australia, Mark McGowan.